Good afternoon, Councilmember Brown.
How you doing, Lisa?
You know, all things considered.
Are you in the office today?
Yeah.
Or is that your house?
No, this is yeah, I'm in City Hall today. So
Wow.
yeah, sometimes it's easier to get things done at home and sometimes it's better to get things done here. So
Agreed.
here.
Yep.
Yeah. Looks like it stopped snowing.
Oh, it did? It was snowing so hard out there a minute or
I
just
know,
not
yeah,
too long ago.
turned around and yeah.
Could have used that snow.
What's that?
Could have used that snow about a month ago.
Geez, no kidding, right? Yeah. World would be a different place.
Definitely would. Lisa, the information that you're going over today is going to be very similar to what you went over yesterday. Is that right?
Yep, tonight, yeah, today is just really intended to duplicate last night's meeting. More
Cool.
opportunity for questions. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, it's 12:59. We want to make sure we give everyone time to log on. So I do see a number of you hopping on to spend the hour with us. We'll give folks more time before we really get started.
Hey, Kyle, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Lisa, was Cameron going to join us today?
Cameron is
Oh,
hopping
yeah,
on
there he
right
is.
now. Yeah. Yes. Thankfully, Cameron is attending. All right. Well, we want to respect your time and get this going. It is 1 o'clock on my as I see it. So we want to thank you for spending an hour here with us. Mostly this hour is going to be devoted to answering your questions, but we do have some updates to share before we get to Q&A. So my name is Lisa Ritchie. I'm serving as the Interim Director for Planning and Building Safety.
And I'm
Chad.
Chad Root. I'm the building official.
Cameron.
I'm Cameron Folks. I'm the Assistant City Engineer.
Great, and want to recognize we have Councilmember Kyle Brown on the call here today as well, just to hear from you, and other council members, you know, kind of may or may not pop on throughout the hour. Really, the intent of this meeting was to have it be directly to be able to communicate with affected residents. So we didn't broadcast this meeting publicly, other than you all got an email invitation directly. But sometimes those get shared and other folks might have heard about it. So we can't just know that there might be others listening in. Just want to let you know that. And so really we understand, I think at this point, that there's still a lot of questions around debris removal and the county's program, and some of you are still making your decisions whether or not to opt in or opt out. It's my understanding that the county is going to be extending that deadline out another week. And so look for that information. Some of you may be contacted by the county to update your opt-in, opt-out forms as well, as they're kind of refining that program. So we'll do our best if you have questions to answer questions about the county coordinated debris removal, but really that's not the intent of today's meeting. We don't have the most recent and all the best information. So really, we do want to try and answer questions for those of you who opt out to understand what the permit requirements are for the debris removal program if you opt out. And then just want to let folks know that we also know that there's a lot of community discussion right now about the building codes. And so we are planning to put on the February 1st City Council agenda a discussion item for City Council to present to them some information regarding the recently adopted energy code, specifically around the costs for implementation and some of the practical considerations. So we don't have any direction at this time for this meeting. If you have questions on the code, that's fine, but we don't have direction on whether or not the code is going to be changing, and that's not really the purpose of today's call. So I think direct your attention to February 1st, 6 p.m. City Council meeting for that. Additionally, we understand that there are some gaps, and we've identified gaps in some of our zoning code, and we've identified some inconsistencies with how the code has been applied over the past 30 or so years since a lot of these homes were initially built. We're planning to put an ordinance in front of City Council on February 15th in order to give planning staff the authority to make some administrative decisions that we currently don't have the authority to do. And really that's intended to allow reasonable and consistent redevelopment. Within each specific neighborhood, we'll have different interpretations given the kind of the context of what was there. And so stay tuned for that. But we know you all are anxious to get started with your architects and things like that. But just know that February 15th, we'll have authority to make that process a lot easier than what we would be required to do today, which is a whole lot of variances potentially. So we know you're anxious to get started, but I think it's in the best interest to make sure we get that direction for some of you. Some of you might have the information you need. And if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to our department. I want to share my screen with you all just to show you a few resources that we have. Some of you may have already found this. I think this is the wrong page. Hold on one sec. Some of you may have already found this. Some of you might not have. Chad, does it look like I'm showing the building safety webpage or a Word document?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, you got the building safety website.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm sharing the right page. So if you go to www.louisvilleco.gov, you'll navigate to the homepage. That's the homepage. From there, you're just going to need to navigate to the building department page. You can find that through local government departments, and then you're going to get to our building safety webpage. Within there, we have a lot of resources on these information that we're going to be presenting tonight. So today is kind of high level overview, but you can look here for more detailed information. Particularly, we have zoning handouts and building code handouts for each affected subdivision, so you can understand your specific regulations here. And then as well as, the debris removal process that we're talking about, all of that, a lot of these questions that you might have could be located here. So visit that resource. Additionally, at the top banner of the city's webpage, we have a lot of general information about Marshall Fire. So if you haven't found this information yet, we just want to highlight it, that there are a lot of resources. And we are updating this as often as need be. And so, as you know, things are changing really quickly. And so feel free to check back here on a regular basis. As we know more, we're adding more information to those two web pages. So thank you for checking those, but also feel free to reach out to us directly. So with that, Chad, can you provide an overview for those who opt out of the county program, what their permit process would look like?
Yeah. So as Lisa mentioned, on the building department website, there's a lot of basic information on there, such as we have a section on contractors. You can see what contractors are licensed in the city of Louisville, and what classifications they have. That doesn't mean that a contractor can't be licensed. Basically, a license means that they've taken the ICC test, which is basically the building code. and they understand the parameters of the building code. For the contractors, owners that are looking at doing the private demo path, kind of opting out, I guess the benefit of that is that you are a little more in control of what's taking place on your lot, since you're hiring the contractor. That is basically regulated through Public Works and the building department as far as what takes place, and the state of Colorado as far as the demolition of the material and where it goes. So basically what we're going to do, if you decide to do the demo and opt out, is Public Works and the building department staff will meet with you on site before we issue the demo permit. And basically it's a pre-con, pre-demolition meeting to go over the site, make sure that we don't have some dangerous retaining walls or issues at the site that you may need to modify or deal with before you start the process. And then what we'll do is we'll require you to have a T-post put in place with the permit and the address on it. Because right now, a lot of the addresses are on the foundations or the sidewalks, and those may get ripped out. So we need to verify what address it is. When you're doing the demo process, you cannot, unless you get a trespass agreement from your neighbor, you cannot trespass onto the neighboring property. This process will basically take place that with the thought that most foundations, if it was a hot fire, which most of these are, where they burned all the way down, and you see the steel I-beams twisted. A lot of people had gun safes and fire safes where when they did open it up, it was just ash inside. That just shows how hot it was, you know, on the foundation and on the floors of the basements, which most of our homes have. And so those foundations will most likely have to be tore out during this process. So your contractor will look at that. Now, if you want to verify that your foundation needs to be tore out or if it can be saved, you'll need to get an engineer, Colorado licensed engineer, to come in, take a look at your foundation and determine, hey, it's salvageable or it's not. The worst case situation is we would hate to permit a $700,000 to $1 million home, just the way market values are going, on a foundation that's not going to hold up the structure. And there may be cases too where an engineer comes in, says the foundation's fine, building staff takes a look at it and is questioning that. We may actually require a third-party engineer to take a look at that as well, just to verify. Like I said, we just don't want to put a new home on a bad foundation. At that process, what you're looking at is with the state, your demolition contractor will have to apply through the state. There's a form. It's basically, there's not a fee. It's kind of the state dumbed it down. So it's kind of a waiver, but there's still criteria that need to be met. During excavation of the material, the site and the ash and the debris needs to be kept wet. They were pretty key on the word wet, not damp, but wet, meaning that, hey, if you're digging through this, there's no chance of any friable dust, which is the asbestos, can get airborne. They don't want it where it's dripping wet, but they want it wet. At any time that we find that, or we have complaints that, hey, the site's not wet or there's any dust coming up at all from this, we may have to do a stop work order until you remedy the problem. So the requirement is you'll have a dumpster on site, either a belly dump or a dumpster, but if you have one, it has to be on your driveway or on site. It cannot be placed at this time on public right of way. Just we don't have enough room for everyone to do that. The debris has to be wrapped in 2 layers of 6 mil plastic And then when it's ready to be transported, it has to be wrapped like a burrito where it's taped over. Make sure your hauler has the proper documentation before they go to landfill. I have heard that landfill has turned people away from lack of proper documentation, which gets pretty expensive because there's only a couple landfills that will accept it. The Erie landfill is one, which is a great benefit because it's close. A lot of the other ones are in Kinsburg or Aurora on that end. Cameron, do you want to touch base on anything else on the demolition process?
No, I think you covered it, mainly with the dumpsters being on private property. We also don't want any debris in the right of way, so any of that will have to be kept out. But I think you covered it well. Thanks, Chad.
Okay. Keeping it wet is going to be a big topic. I found out from Cameron that a lot of the fire hydrants got hot enough that the valves ended up getting too hot where they may have to be replaced. And so you may have to actually haul your water in with a truck from a different site where you can't use a fire hydrant at this time. You'll have to check with Public Works to see what hydrants are up and operating before you get into it. And if you are planning on using the hydrant, you'll have to get with operations and get a meter. Is that correct, Cameron?
Yeah, Chad, thanks. That's a good summary. But yeah, we have a water meter program. You'll just go to our operations department and pick up a water meter. And like Chad said, we have water lines that are currently shut off in a lot of these burn areas. So you may have to drive for a little bit to find a fire hydrant that actually has water. So our plan is to get these hydrants back up, but some of them are burned pretty bad and they may leak. So we may not be able to turn them all back on. So.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over because I know we had a meeting a couple weeks ago and there was a lot of questions out there for staff as far as this process. And I want to make sure that we have enough time for questions and try to get answers to you. We may not know the answer, but we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible on that. And then we'll kind of go from there. So I think at this point, I'm ready to open it up to questions if you guys are.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chad. So feel free to use the raise hand function, excuse me, at the bottom of the screen, or *9 if you're on your phone. We're just going to go down the list as we see them. Just for a little bit of reference, we have roughly 50 folks here listening in attendance this afternoon. So first up, we have Frank Price.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes,
We can.
Hey, thank you all for doing this. We were at 837 Trail Ridge Drive in the Summit. Love Louisville. Just a thing being on the ridge there, it's been pointed out to us by engineering firms and contractors that we may have helical piers that were the original foundation. So not a traditional foundation. It's probably more of a debris removal question for the county, but wanted to get any advice or guidance from you guys. If those piers are in the ground, as we think they are with rebar, FEMA and those guys may not mark them or mitigate them properly. And if they leave them in the ground, that will create little landmines for any rebuild that we'll have to avoid and have a completely different foundational pour, which may impact setbacks and stuff and make it really tricky with constraints. So we either need to get those mitigated in the debris removal or marked. And if they're marked, it'll be a Jenga puzzle between where a new foundation can go and may cause some challenges with setbacks because there's a lot of those piers and you got to be 3 to 7 feet away from each one with a new foundation. So have you guys gotten this question or heard anything about this, and what's your guidance on it?
That's the first question that we had on that. And you bring up a really good point, Frank, on those that, hey, that's an engineered system. What you may be up against is working with another engineering firm to engineer out where you can use the same piers or place them right next to those existing ones. As far as setbacks and zoning, I'm going to let Lisa respond to that one.
Sure. So I think, from time to time, unique circumstances pop up, and this certainly could be one that we need to work with homeowners on. So I think as soon as you've identified if this is a constraint for your particular lot, please reach out to us and we can kind of figure out the best path forward for you, and where we can, we can kind of work with you just to understand the issue and what options might be the best path for you to take. So as soon as you know if this is an issue, reach out to us directly. We can work with you.
Okay, thank you. And if you guys can be a voice with the county or FEMA and debris removal to make sure that they either mark those or mitigate those, because there's going to be a lot of homes with them, I believe. We'd appreciate that, because if they just do the cleanup and we go there and they're underground, they've created a situation that's pretty challenging and costly for homeowners.
Frank, just as a suggestion, Cameron here, there is some area on your right of entry form, if you choose to go the county route, that you can add comments or personal items that they can search for. I would suggest putting something in there about marking those helical piers, and hopefully they can take heed to that and mark them as they go, if you opt in, obviously.
Yeah, no, great question. I've already opted in and I made that note, Cameron, so
Okay.
good advice. But hopefully they notify us and we can be there and talk to them about it as well.
Great.
Our understanding that they intend to publish some sort of kind of dashboard on where they are as scheduled. So as they're finalizing their contract and hiring their contractor, and if the city wants to know this information too. So our goal is to be able to provide a fairly accurate estimate on where these contractors are moving through the neighborhoods. And so we'll be trying to work on that the best we can, because we all, I think, have those same types of questions. So yes, I think it sounds like you've done what you need for now. And I would say certainly stay engaged. And as the contractor with FEMA or with the county is selected, we'll know more on how those types of communications can be established.
Great, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, next up, we have Catherine Kuster.
Hi there. Hi, thanks for the meeting. I have a couple questions. One is just sort of about general timelines. Like, do we have any sort of idea about the timeline of the demolition going forward? I'm trying to figure out if I should get my own guy or go with the county. So timelines, and then sort of like the order that they would be doing that in. And then if I decide to do it on my own, is there sort of a timeline for the availability of my contractor to get that permit?
Sure. So I think that's kind of the question that we're getting the most often of every day. And unfortunately, the city does not have information, and the county hasn't developed that overall schedule yet. So they just are submitting the application to FEMA for final approval. We have to wait a couple weeks to understand the FEMA approval and the final conditions that are going to come down with that, and the final scope. And then the county is also reviewing contractors to award this contract to. And so we understand the urgency, but unfortunately we don't have the information for you. My understanding though is that you can remain opted in to the county program and explore your own options for debris removal at the same time. So if you want to leave both options on the table at this point, the latest information we have from the county is that you can opt out later. I would say stay tuned to that though, because they have changed their direction on that over the past few weeks, but current direction is you can opt out after the deadline. And so you could explore contractor pricing, their own timeline, things like that, as you're making your decision. But unfortunately, that's probably the best we can offer for that. And then obviously too, if you select your own contractor, we are anticipating issuing demo permits as soon as February 1st. We do need to get those pre-construction meetings scheduled with your contractor ahead of time, and make sure that your permit applications are complete. We're still kind of wrapping up some of the final guidance around that, but you would have control over your timeline for demolition if you go on your own path. We do want to caveat though, again, we have some outstanding for the rebuild side from a timing expectation. We have some outstanding permit or zoning code things we need to get resolved, may or may not apply to your property. And then even if your lot is cleared, there may be some public infrastructure needs that still need to come through in advance of probably not permit issuance, but at least occupancy. So we're still working to determine impacts to our water system, sanitary system. Excel is still working through the neighborhoods. So all of that is changing quickly, but we will keep everyone updated as we know more.
Sorry, one more question, may I?
Yep.
I was looking at the PUD for my neighborhood, and I was just sort of wondering, are we keeping that, like, you know, when it says like you can't have a flat roof or you have to have a cedar fence, you know, so there's no HOA now, but with the original PUD guidelines, are those going to stand or are those going to be revisited?
So the intent of the original PUDs will remain in place, but also there may be covenants. So I'm not aware of any PUDs for these neighborhoods that require a flat roof. Those may be established kind of within your neighborhood covenants, but reach out to us directly if you have questions on design. We can let you know more specifically how they are applying to your neighborhood.
Okay.
All right, next up we have Denny Ferreira.
Yes, I got a couple questions. Some of it's to deal more with the rebuild. On the permit fees, will we have to pay the sewer and tap fees again, since the house has already been there? And I've been told that we might need a larger line going into the house than a 3/4 inch for the fire suppression requirement that the city has.
Cameron, you want this one?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, so as far as tap fees goes, as long as you build, I'll say, a similar size house with similar water fixture units, you won't have any additional water tap fees. But if you decide to add on or make a larger home, let's just say you have 2 bathrooms now and you go to 5 bathrooms and add another kitchen, there's a chance you may have a water tap expansion fee if you go, you know, significantly larger with your home. As far as the fire suppression goes, right now with the rebuilds, what we require is a 1-inch meter and a 1-inch line going into the house. Sometimes the designers on the fire suppression system go bigger after the meter. There's a chance that the city is going to have to replace its portion of the water service. We don't know that information yet, but if we do that, you'll have a 1-inch line coming into the lot, and then you'll go into the 1-inch meter, and then whatever size you need to get into your home. The other scenario is if we leave the water services as is, you'll have a 3/4 inch by 1-inch meter setter that'll be able to accept a 1-inch meter, and then from there you'll go on into the home. So hopefully that.
Can you clarify, Cameron, if there's a fee to upgrade from the 3/4 to the 1 for fire suppression purposes?
Not for fire suppression. So as long as, again, your home is similarly built and you don't exceed that requirement to go to a 1-inch meter for your domestic use, then there's no fee to go to the 1-inch just for fire suppression. But if you have exceeded those fixture units to go up to a 1-inch for your domestic use, then there will be an expansion.
Yeah, the other another question on fees is the impact fees that the city's charging for building permits. I don't see where us rebuilding our homes is going to impact the city, library, transportation, et cetera. It's going to have the same people there, the same numbers. So I would encourage the council members and people to think about eliminating the impact usage fees if possible. I understand the need for additional reviews and so forth for the planning department and adding people. So review fees are something that I think they need to be kept. So I understand about recouping that.
Impact fees, I'll clarify real quickly. Impact fees would only apply on the incremental difference for larger homes. So again, same assumption, that's the current policy now, is similar to a water tap expansion fee. Impact fees don't apply unless you're building the incremental, whatever that incremental difference on something larger than what you had. And we'll look to establish what you had. We can, try and find the best information. So typically we rely on kind of county assessor data, your building permit record, things like that to set the baseline for what was there before.
Okay. And then can the city council and staff meet more often, city council meetings, to accelerate some of these questions on issues and resolve the issues instead of just every twice a month. I mean, to me, it would be reasonable to have a city council meeting almost every week to resolve issues and get it on. So we know what the zoning requirements are, what the codes are going to be. So I would just urge that we look at this more as a task force and a command center where you have to put things on the agenda, meet with it, resolve them, and then go forward. I understand there's being on city council in the 80s and 90s. I understand you have to have time to print the ordinance and so forth, but I don't think that. I think you could do it in an accelerated manner. That's just my opinion on that. And that's all I have to say, basically. Just wanted to look at the fees. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councilmember Lays with his hands raised.
Denny, you raised a really good point, and as you probably imagine, council is pretty busy these days. We do have much more frequent meetings than that. They can be attended by the public. We've had them in the past couple of weeks, and this has been noticed, but you may not know about it every day. But we have switched back to Tuesdays and Thursdays. We had one this morning, but they're study sessions, which is to say that the city manager is updating us on what's happened in the last 24, 48 hours, and then what is on tap for the next couple of days. Because you may have missed those, and other people have as well. You can go on the city council part of the website, and they usually do a summary of those meetings, and you can learn what's been going on. So it's the one thing about them is they are study sessions, so they're not sessions at which council either makes decisions or gives direction. And so we provide some information, get some information, but there's no public comment in those. Obviously, you can get in touch with us any time you like, but I want to make it clear that that is available to you, and we are in fact getting an awful lot of stuff done in that, and it's a good way to keep up with things on a more regular basis.
Hey, Chris, yeah, I understand that, but again, you can't take action at the study sessions. At a city council meeting, you guys could take actions, put it out for publication, and in 2 weeks have it back on for the second reading and voting and so forth. So I appreciate study sessions and so forth. There's a lot of good discussion that goes on in them, but there's no ability to take an action that the city council needs to take that would accelerate us learning about what the codes are going to be and so forth. Again, I said, this is my opinion, and I think that I see it as the city council could do additional meetings and with public hearings and so forth. So
you raise a good point, and I'll only say, and then it looks like Councilmember Brown wants to chime in. We are, I think, to some extent, clearly council has decisions to make, and we will meet more regularly to the extent that that those decisions need to be made. But what I would say is a lot of decisions need to be made by staff, and I mean by that day to day. A lot of the discussions and negotiations and so forth are appropriately under the charter to be led by staff, and keeping us in the loop means that we get a chance to say, well, wait a second, we think that's a policy issue that council needs to weigh in on. So but you're raising a good point, and I think we're going to be responding as appropriate.
Yeah, at least if it's okay, I'll just chime in and just say that I think I just echo Councilmember Lay's comments and say that we in the city council are willing to meet as frequently as we need to. What we've been doing so far, in particular, is trying to understand what issues may need policy level changes and ordinances, and planning staff in particular have been doing a very detailed study of the costs of building costs and codes and other things that Planner Ritchie mentioned at the beginning. And so that's part of that has been, that's kind of the reason we've already passed an ordinance to waive utility fees for January for everyone, and to make sure that if your home was destroyed, that you're not paying any utility bills from the city. So we are taking action, and we're just making sure that we have the right information before we do it. But I agree with Councilmember Lay that it's a really great comment, and thank you for raising that.
All right, next up we have Kevin Lombardo. Oh, sorry. There we go. Sorry, Kevin. I think you should be good to go now.
Hey, yeah, I think I am. Thank you. Yep, Kevin Lombardo. We live up on Sunflower Street, or lived up on Sunflower Street. Behind our houses and a number of our neighbors' houses is that fairly large retaining wall. And I think a number of us, but myself especially, are curious as to what the plan is, or if there is a plan for how to deal with those retaining walls, either from a debris cleanup standpoint or a structural integrity standpoint. You know, after the debris cleanup is done on the lots above it and below it, you know, is the town going to, you know, play any part in testing those to make sure they're okay and they're not going to collapse on us in a few years, or dig them up and regrade the whole thing, or what?
Cameron, you want this one?
Sure. So as far as retaining walls, I haven't looked at the ones up on Sunflower. I don't know, were those wood or are they stone? Or
These are stone.
Okay. So with regards to that, the debris removal will come in and they will do any stabilization required. So if you opt in, the county will have to look at it, make sure it's okay for them to go in and do debris removal. If you go your own route, then your contractor will have to hire an engineer, or you, and come up with a stabilization plan or say that the wall is okay. And then, so that kind of covers debris removal. And then when you move forward into new construction, depending on what you did with debris removal, you may have to reconstruct walls. That'll be part of your new permit. Or if the walls were okay, you just leave them in place and we say they're good from the demo permit. So they're all on private property. They were kind of built for the development of the lots. So there's not anything as far as public safety goes, as far as the right of ways go, that we deal with the retaining walls in that manner. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It sounds like if there is a problem with those walls and they need to either come down and be rebuilt or whatever, that's ours to do. That's a private thing. The town is not going to do that, right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Christian Dino.
Hi, thank you.
Sorry, try again, Christian.
Sorry about that. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we sure can.
I just wanted to take the opportunity, since we do have several council members here, to request that there be some consideration given to those of us who have lost everything in our homes, that in terms of all of the new building codes that have been adopted, you know, a month prior to this tragic occurrence, and that something be looked at in terms of how we can go about all of the added costs with this that are coming. I mean, it's costs upon costs upon costs for those of us that are already underinsured to begin with. And a lot of these are just going to be over the top and pushing families out of Louisville that consider this their home. And I know that there was mention of cost analysis earlier. Is there a timetable for when that will be ready for public distribution?
Yeah, we are working really, really hard to get that in the city council packet that would be published tomorrow. And then for presentation for city council on February 1st. All right, any other questions?
That's all that I have.
Okay, thank you. I have no hands raised right now, so I know a lot of you have been here to listen in, but this is the first time we've had a meeting and I don't have any hands raised at this point, so I would welcome any other questions that you all have. Please take a minute and find the raise hand button if you have more that we haven't covered. If not,
What I might do, Lisa, while we're waiting for questions, maybe just hit a couple of high points.
okay.
Um,
Go ahead, Chad, and then I do see a hand that raised, so let's go ahead and cover a few high points and then we'll
Okay.
get back to questions.
You know, as your building official, I just recommend that as you enter the rebuilding process, talk with as many contractors as you can. Kind of interview them like an employee. Do reference checks on them to make sure that, hey, they're going to be the best bet for you. Talk with your neighbors too and seeing who they're using. Because the best bet for a lot of these neighborhoods is the less contractors that are working on a particular neighborhood, the better. Just because of the cost of materials, they have better buying power. And then as far as construction activity, they can be put in one foundation after another foundation at that point. So just check around, do your research. Also note that there's a contractors expo that's a resident of Louisville started, and it's going in, he's going in with the Ascent Church to put this on, and that's going to be February 25th and 26th. We will have a city booth there for code questions, but this is actually led by a private individual, a resident of Louisville, and the thought is it will be for people of Superior and Boulder County to meet different contractors and different groups. And also at this time, just with lumber costs, you know, maybe it's time to think of alternative construction materials, such as, for an example, in a lot of mountain communities, manufactured homes, and don't think of the double wide trailer, but think of really nice 10,000 square foot homes. 20% of those homes in mountain communities are done by manufactured facilities. And the reason why is just because of time and labor and materials. So they can put them in pretty fast. They set a foundation, and then, you know, given the time frame, they can put a pretty nice manufactured home in. Straw bale, earth ram, SIPS panels, ICF blocks. There's a lot to consider as far as alternative types. And then as the building department too understands that a lot of people are underinsured, as you go through the building process, kind of like what we see in a lot of mountain communities where people don't have enough money to rebuild. We're looking at and willing to work with owners and contractors on phasing their single family home, meaning that if you don't have enough money to finish the whole house, you could finish the main level as long as you have a kitchen, bedroom, bathrooms in there, and not finish the basement or the upstairs until you have money at a later time. That way you're not losing out on the square footage of that home that you really desire. So I just wanted to throw that out there as far as, hey, we're willing to work with you. Any questions at all, give us a call at any time. We'll try to help you through the process.
Thanks, Chad. All right, next up we have Susan Liu.
Okay. Am I on?
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Great. So, I was wondering if you all could give me any advice. I know that I have peers under my foundation, but all the documents I have on that are destroyed. And so I've checked with the county for any deed that they might have had in their records. They don't have it. And it's like I know that I've got piers under my foundation. So, is there do you know of any way that I can, find that out? And whether that's going to be a problem, or do I have to go out and hire an engineer?
So as far as on the rebuild process, you will have to, your soil type up where you're at, they probably had a soils report where it was very, you had a lot of expansive soil is what I'm guessing. And so they could not do the typical stem wall and footer foundation. So at what I would recommend is you will probably have to get it with an engineer to redesign that foundation. And that engineer may come up and say, hey, those piers are fine to connect a new foundation to. They just have to scrape the top portion of the foundation. It's going to have to be, it will have to be designed by a Colorado licensed engineer though.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have David Swedler.
Shit. We've got piers. I just don't know where.
All right, David, you might need to unmute on your end. David, there's probably a way to unmute. I'm not sure if you can find that button. We'll give you another little bit here. There you go.
Hi, can you hear me now? This is David Swedler at 956 St. Andrews Lane
Yes, we
in
can hear you.
Louisville. Okay. My first question has to do with the retaining wall. They were built in our subdivision out of what I believe is a 0.4 copper chromated arsenic or CCA pressure treated lumber, and they typically have about a 30-year in-ground contact lifespan. So they're approaching the end of their life. My question is, the EPA still allows their use, but not, as far as I know, for residential applications. Does the city of Louisville intend to specify that those particular green timbers, which pretty much still have the best rot resistance, can no longer be used in residential retaining wall situations? So the developer built the retaining walls probably in between 88 and 92, because it was done before the St. Andrews Lane was even, the roadway was even created. And they were done en masse and then backfilled, and the soil was tamped. So they were built in free space. If we have to go to replace them, it's not clear to me what kind of alternative building materials we're looking at, but I think we can say that most of them are going to be significantly more expensive than the original retaining wall. And it may be that the city of Louisville or Boulder County doesn't allow the use of those particular building materials at this time, especially in private backyards, because those are all now on individual lots and not basically public areas. Does anyone have any knowledge of this? Or, I mean, this is going to be something for the structural engineers to address, but before we actually engage them individually or en masse, it might be nice to know that the original retaining wall structure is going to have to change as far as the materials.
That's a great point. We've only begun discussions within the last few days over kind of the future retaining wall design, and if the city, I think, is going to take a position on limiting building materials, particularly the wood materials, due to, impacts from fire. So I don't have anything more to add to that right now. Cameron or Chad, is there anything more that we can add?
I don't have anything more. I know that we're looking at it. We discussed it. Just as you mentioned, David, wood it's an organic matter, has a half-life of, they say 30 years, but in some locations, if it's constantly wet, it's less. So we've been talking about different materials, but also it's a little bit about, hey, what's reasonable on cost too. We don't want to require something that's expensive, and you know, we're looking at it, I guess. How about you, Cameron?
I'm not sure on the wood piece, I don't know what we allow today currently for people to install retaining walls. So that would be a good question for, I guess, you, Chad. But as far as that type of wood and whether or not it's allowed, I'm not a retaining wall expert, so I don't know.
I can say that I think it was 2003, the EPA stopped their sale, and they the big block retailer like Lowe's and Home Depot, et cetera, they switched over to a brown that's called like ACQ or quat, and it has a distinctive brown color, but it not only costs more, but it doesn't have the same rated ground contact rating as the previous generation of CCA because it's not as toxic and it's basically less harmful to the soil when it leaches. So if you've got burned CCA, you've now put hexavalent chromium and arsenic into the soil, and the chromium and copper is probably a bigger problem than the arsenic because our soils are rich in arsenic anyway. But my point is just that there was a reason why the EPA mandated that they couldn't be used for residential applications. You can't go to your Lowe's or Homes and come home with the truck full of them like I used to do. It's because they're really not safe and close to residential areas. So I would imagine that even if it's not on the books, there would probably be a strong desire to move to a more environmentally benign pressure treating solution than CCA. It is actually suitable for marine contact, full marine contact, but that requires a much higher level of it. And I don't think it's really safe for marine life anyway. So it is allowed. The other question I have has to do with foundations, and it has to do with a meeting that a neighbor had with a structural engineer who did a tap test with a large hammer. And basically, after looking at a number of the foundations that were accessible shortly after the snowstorm, he said that from his preliminary investigation, he thought that the foundations that he had examined were about 85% good and would require only 15% of repairs in order to be reusable. So the question becomes, I can understand Chad and the city of Louisville's position that the homeowner is going to be responsible for proving that the foundation is good, and it's not going to just be the homeowner's word, it's going to require structural engineers test. Can you speak to whether or not, if we've granted an ROE, if we can specify that the debris removal proceed, but it would stop at the level of the foundation? So it would be up to, but not including the foundation, if we have reason to believe due to a structural engineering report that it is reusable and would need to be repaired. Is that possible to specify in the ROE that we don't want our foundation pulled because we're going to attempt to repair it? And the second, because we would want to participate in the debris removal because a lot of the toxic ash and things are going to be removed en masse by people who are trained to do it rather than contractors that may or may not have the necessary experience, even if they tell the homeowner they do. So that's the first question. The second one is the city going to require, say, core drilling tests of the foundation with compression tests, like send a core drill out to an outside lab? Is that something you would imagine doing? I think it was more standard in the past, but it looks like a lot of the structural engineers are basically assessing the foundation integrity using visual, as well as they said they could bring in like a structural sonogram equipment if need be, but they're looking at the same things that Chad was looking at, which is like obvious spalling and soft spots and complete deformation and exposure of rebar. And some of the foundations, I can't speak to my own because it was basically buried in snow, appeared visually to this structural engineer to be warranting of a further, more in-depth test, because to his eye and his audio clues from banging on it, that it looked to be structurally still doing its job with only maybe 15% of it on the upper areas requiring repair. And the question is, how adversarial is the city going to be about these reports? Are you going to automatically require like third-party testing? Because Chad's kind of come out and stated that he thinks, to his mind, that most of the foundations are bad. And, you know, I respect everyone's opinion. I can't really weigh in with my own because I'm not a professional structural engineer or civil engineer, but I do understand what it is that they're stating and how they're coming to their conclusions. And it probably is a bit preliminary at this point, but it appears that certain homeowners could save a substantial amount of money if they don't actually have to demo the old foundation and then remove a considerable amount of soils, especially if they're dealing with issues with retaining walls that are located close by. If you can maintain the foundation and possibly use it even as an exterior form for an interior pour, which this engineer did point out that there are mechanisms that basically shrink your interior basement dimensions by the width of the new foundation, and you use the old one as a formwork, and you don't actually have to remove it, and it somehow maintains integrity with the spread footing that's invisible because it's below the grade level, but spread out, and that's what's providing resistance to expansive soils. So this may not apply to people on caissons or piers or helical inserts as much as it applies to the more standard, and probably there's more of us with a standard spread foot. But it looks like what the structural engineer was advising us to do was to go out, if our foundation appears to the eye to be still standing, then go out and actually get a structural engineer's report on whether or not it could be used with repairs. And apparently there are a dramatic number of new materials being used to repair foundations, because like everything else, they're expensive, and there's new ways every year that have stood the test of time to repair them. So I'm just bringing this up because it has an impact on how we would proceed with the right of entry, whether we revoke it fully or we just allow debris cleanup to occur, and also to what extent the cost of the structural engineering report might double or triple if we have to do core testing in an outside lab in order to meet city or Boulder County requirements in order to ascertain the integrity of the foundation. So that was my second question.
Okay. Hey, David, I'll answer that foundation part. So if you get a Colorado licensed engineer and they say the foundation is okay and they've tested it in their capability, what I will do is I'll go out there, or my inspectors will go out there, and we'll take a look at it. And it's kind of like what you mentioned. If we see that, hey, there's spalding and there's problems with it, it's visual to the eye that, hey, there's some questions, number of cracks, spalding, discoloration, it's kind of moved in an area. At that point, that's probably when we'll require a third party engineer to come and just validate what the other engineer said. But if we go out there and the foundation looks good, and it's just the typical cracking that you see for a foundation of that age, and they put their state Colorado license stamp on that report, then we're going to be fine.
So I understand what you're saying. If the engineer was promoting like a 15% repair, you would probably want to inspect it before you allow the repairs, and then again after, because repairs can cover up defects that maybe they're not actually structurally repairable. And so my question is like a difference of opinion about what constitutes cosmetic versus structural repairs and all that. And you would definitely want to get a structural engineer who's familiar with the repair process, so that you engage contractors that are actually doing the right thing, because you don't really want to just band-aid or cover up with concrete patch materials significant problems. And so I would agree with you that you don't want to erect a house of this value on top of a foundation that's not going to support it over the anticipated 30, 50 year lifetime.
Sure. So,
yeah.
Sorry, just to try and, I think in what you're suggesting is if the engineer is stating that the foundation is fine as is, that's where we may require a structural engineer third-party review if we don't agree on a visual inspection. But if the engineer of record is proposing repairs along with that, this portion of the foundation is okay, this portion of the foundation needs repairs in order to serve the life of the next home, those would probably just become a case-by-case decision that we would work with that structural engineer. And then to answer your other question, it is our understanding that if the foundation is salvageable and the city of Louisville certifies such through our process, which would require an engineer to state that the county is going to structure their contract in order to be able to save those foundations and not do unnecessary work. But I would say stay tuned on that as we develop the final program through FEMA and the contractor. So thank you, David. I think those were great questions. We'll move on to Stephen Wax.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay. I have more of just a very general basic question. These questions are great and they're very detailed and interesting, but a lot of us are underinsured and cannot afford to rebuild. So we're in a situation where we're probably going to have to try and sell the lot. And I'm wondering, has anyone really looked at how to make this process somewhat efficient and less costly for a large builder to come in, maybe buy multiple lots and rebuild in the neighborhood?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
we're actively talking as the city to a lot of our mid-size and smaller home builders to understand the decision-making process they have in front of them as to whether or not they want to engage in the city. So the city at this point in time isn't going to take a position or make any of these decisions, but between Chad and I, we're having numerous conversations with a lot of our home builders to try and help them make these decisions, because we do see substantial benefit from a cost perspective if these home builders come in and collectively work with neighborhoods. So Chad, I don't know if you want to add more to that or if that answered your question, Stephen.
Yeah, well, I will just say that from where it seems now, just logically listening to what the county is saying about the debris removal, it's going to have to be numerous contractors to get this work done in a more timely manner. I don't know how many of these specialized contractors there are out there, but for someone who lost their home, it's important to sell the lot in order they can repurchase and even stay in the city at some point, if that's even possible. And just having the ability to know from a time frame that you're talking about that this can happen within a year or two, that you could get out from underneath the land so that you can repurchase somewhere else, is a fairly large issue for us being underinsured. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we understand that more than anything as the city. Our electeds and appointed certainly understand this. As staff, we understand it. And I think we are pushing, we're pushing the decision makers above us as hard as we can to make these decisions and push on time. So we understand that that is such a high priority.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. I see Frank Price with his hand raised again. We have time for a few more questions.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay again?
Yes.
We can. Yep.
It's kind of the reverse of the last question around lots. Does the city have a position on anyone who maybe wants to defer the build or just sit on the lot as an investment? And literally, I know these are planned communities, but what does it mean if somebody makes a decision to just leave a lot for years and years and years? Any perspective on that?
So I think up front, there is an expectation and an obligation to make sure the debris is removed from your lot and the lot is returned to a safe condition. But beyond that, we haven't taken a position. We haven't taken a position as a city as to what incentives we would maybe offer in order to rebuild it, or if we even take a position at all. I mean, these are privately owned properties. We don't have a requirement that they get rebuilt. We have a requirement that they get maintained in kind of a safe and adequate manner. So no weeds and things like that. But beyond that, I don't know that I would have more to add on that unless any of the council members want to chime in at this point, but I don't know that we know more than that.
Okay, that was, yeah, I appreciate that, Lisa. I just trying to understand all options. We want to rebuild and love Louisville. It's just got to understand them all because underinsurance is a huge issue.
Absolutely. All right, so it is 2:01. I see one more hand raised. We'll take one more question, but if people need to hop off, I just want to offer our contact information quickly. You can email us at building@louisvilleco.gov or planning@louisvilleco.gov with any of your questions. With that, I see Christian Dino.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So additional question in regards to all of both the city utility infrastructure as well as third-party infrastructure. How is that being assessed? What's the timeline on its assessment and repair? Things like water, sewer, power, cable, internet, phones, things of that nature, and our XL, Comcast, CenturyLink, those third-party folks being included within the assessment at this time to determine kind of how quickly that can be repaired, replaced, if needed, so that when we do reconstruct, all of those things are in place and ready for us to attach to.
We're in communications with all of those entities. Cameron, I don't know if you have any update on timing at this point. We don't really have much to share yet with.
I just know that they're working on it. I don't have a timeline as from them, or I haven't heard on a timeline, but I know Excel's working hard on trying to get everything back up, and I think CenturyLink and Comcast are doing the same, I'm sure. So, and as far as the water and the sewer go, our sewer mains, we did a sample video of our mains in the streets, and they seem to have fared fine through the fires. The sewer service lines will be up to the homeowners. So whether or not a portion of that needs to be repaired or replaced. And then the water services I kind of went over before, there's a possibility we may have to replace the city portion of the water service from the main to the curb stop. We haven't determined that yet, but and timing on that, again, we need to determine whether we need to replace them, and then timing will be following that. So
additionally, another question in regards to city infrastructure as it relates to public right-of-ways, streets, sidewalks, gutters, things of that nature that are typically, on the city spectrum for repair replacement over time. Obviously, we're going to be incurring a lot heavier traffic usage than normal over the course of the next year or two. And how is the city looking at addressing repair replacement of some of these things, so that as we do finish the reconstruction of our homes, we're not driving down dilapidated, deteriorated streets with potholes left and right, or sidewalks crumbling or whatever else. And or is there in terms of the sidewalk or gutter, is that going to be something that's looked to for the homeowner in direct proximity, that from property lines, that's their responsibility, or is that going to be city responsibility for those things after the fact?
sure, good question. So as far as the streets and curb and walk, we are looking at those. Right now we're assessing what's been damaged by the fire, and then we're doing that for our FEMA assessments for public assistance. We have already started putting in future roadway improvements for damaged concrete, damaged asphalt, as you mentioned, with all the heavy traffic and the rebuild. So that's being included in that. We haven't had specific conversations with FEMA on what they're going to pay for, but we are moving forward with that. So ideally, after the rebuild, we come in, fix damaged concrete, fix damaged asphalt that's throughout these subdivisions. As far as the property owner's responsibility, so these are all curb walk sections. So the property owner is required from the back of the walk on their driveway into the home. So wherever their driveway attaches to the back of the walk into your property is the homeowner's requirement. So.
Great,
Thank you for that. And Cameron, Lisa, Chad, thank you for everything you guys are doing behind the scenes. I do understand it's tremendous responsibility, and that you guys are really going above and beyond. I'm sure it's not the typical 40-hour work week these days.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for that. All right, so we want to thank everyone again for spending the hour with us. Please stay tuned in your emails. We're going to be sending out a survey in the next day or so. The city is seeking, between the planning department, building department, and city manager's office, we just want to send a survey to you to understand kind of your circumstances as you're getting your feet under you a little bit and beginning to think about the future. We would like to just do a check-in with your needs and some of the decisions that you're making. So look for that in your email in the coming days. And we do appreciate if you take the time to fill that out. It helps us understand best how we can continue to serve you. So we will be in touch. Stay tuned for more information as we know more. Everyone have the best day. Thank you.
Thank you.